ask yourself first, if I weren't here tomorrow, would my loved ones know exactly what to do and have everything they needed? And, if the answer is no, it's really time for you to kind of toughen up your overall plans. There's ways that we want to help you prevent having legacy planning mistakes. And, as a financial professional that's been in the business for over 30 years and focused in the retirement space, unfortunately, we've seen this happen so many times with families, uh, ultimately in a situation where they don't really understand, what the plan was. The plan wasn't clearly, documented. It creates family crisis and or excess taxes and estate plans. So I'm going to show you how to tighten up your plans in 5 simple steps. Number 1 is what I want you to do is I want you to have a written and updated estate plan. In having a written or updated estate plan, you can do it in a couple of easy ways. First of all, I would say if you look at things like doing it online, there is a couple of online services that you have, anywhere from like Free Will, there's Legal Shield, there's Wills and Trust, there's Zoom. So looking at some of these online services that are out there, even Legal Zoom, it gives you the ability to have an online outlet to be able to put things inside of there. Or you have the ability where you could get together with a local estate planning attorney. There's a couple of estate planning attorneys that I work with. Some people say, hey, Nolan, I don't want to create something as important as my estate plans by myself. I'd rather sit down and maybe spend a little extra money working with a local attorney who does it for a living and can guide me through the process. And, as your situation gets more complicated or changes over time, that would be a reason why to have things updated. There's a lot of times that people will come in and they'll say, I did my estate plans when my kids were little, and I really haven't looked at it since then. I could say for myself and my wife and our family, that was how we were up until recently. When our kids were little, we got an estate plan put in place. And essentially, I think about like most families, I love my wife, she loves me. If something happens to me, I take care of her and vice versa. And then if something happens to both of us, we want the money to go to our 2 children. Well, at the time of originally crafting our estate plans, our kids were just minors. So we wanted to put some language inside of there that addressed who was, number 1, going to care for them if something happened while they were minors. But number 2, we wanted to also address the issue of the fact that at 18 and years old, if something happened, I don't necessarily think an 18-year-old should have all of the financial assets at once. We put a couple of what's called successor trustees to help them with the management of the money as they grew up and got older in life until they were in their 30s. We flash forward to today. My son tomorrow actually has his 22nd birthday. My youngest son is 18. Both boys are Eagle Scouts. One has a college degree, has worked here in the business with me for a couple of years. I feel very comfortable with that. My children have become much more responsible than when they were just little kids. I feel much more comfortable with their ability to make smart financial decisions. So, we've updated the estate plans because of the fact that they're a little bit older. So as life changes, look at, having that in place. So number 1 is have a written and updated estate plan. Number 2 is what you want to do is you want to look at making sure that you title your assets correctly. And this is a big one that could catch you off guard. I'll have people that will come into the office and they will talk about the fact of they spent the money and they created a trust. And if you think about it, think of a trust like a box. In essence, a trust is typically only as good as what you put in the box. So if you don't retitle things like your bank accounts or your house into trust, you may lose the benefits of what was the original intent of how that trust was designed to help maybe keep your information private and or out of probate. Titling is very important if you maybe have lost a spouse. I live here in Ohio, and my wife and I, we have our house in trust, but another common way in Ohio to own your house is what's called joint tenants with rights of survivorship. And that means if something happens to me, my wife gets the house and vice versa. But if you're in a situation where you don't have a spouse at home and you own your personal property and you pass away, your property most likely could be a probatable asset unless you take some steps, either again through a trust or you establish what is called like a transfer on death deed on a paid on death deed. Those are what I'm talking about when you're looking at properly titling your account. So what we typically would recommend there is create a financial inventory. Write down all the things that have financial value associated with them. You're going to have a group of investments and accounts that fall into titled assets, your bank accounts, brokerage, non-retirement accounts, could be your house, cars, those type of things you're going to look at titling. And number three, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at then the other assets that you have. And with those other assets, what you're going to want to do is have an updated beneficiary form. With a beneficiary form on a life insurance contract, it could be a annuity contract, your 401k, your IRA, your Roth IRA, those type of accounts, you're going to have a named beneficiary. And when you're looking at a named beneficiary, I also think that there's several key elements that are important to having a named beneficiary and understanding how the distribution works with named beneficiaries. First and foremost, you want to have a primary beneficiary. That's, again, who you're going to leave the money to. In this case, it could be my wife as my primary beneficiary. I could name her 100%. That means if I pass away, that account is going over to my wife. Then you want to have a contingent or secondary beneficiary. Again, in my example, I could name my two boys as my contingent beneficiary. In addition to naming an individual, you want to have their date of birth, their social security number, their physical address, and the exact percentage that you leave to them. Being in business over 30 years, it would be common for me 30 years ago in setting up, let's say, a life insurance policy. I may name as a contingent beneficiary back years ago, divided equally amongst all children of this marriage. Well, flash forward to today, that's kind of a broad term, right? We have blended families. That may not be enough of an identifiable feature. And the best way to know if your beneficiary forms are correct is to reach out the custodian or the holder of your life insurance or annuity or 401k account and ask them to physically mail you a copy of what they have listed in writing. When you get that, what you want to do is stick it with your other estate planning documents so you have proof in writing of what you submitted. You don't want to assume that your beneficiary form is on file and correct just because you feel like you filled it out a couple of years ago. Keep your beneficiary form updated and get it in writing. Number four, what you want to do is communicate with your family what your wishes are. Again, using myself as an example, I own America's Retirement Headquarters. I own the Retirement Guys Formula, America's Medicare Associates, Retirement Tax Partners. My wife and I, we have our joint accounts. And there's a lot of moving parts, having a son in the business, one going to college. There's different things that are happening, and it's, I think, important that we sat down as a family and we kind of had talked through and communicated with the family that says, hey, if something happens to dad, this is what things look like. If something happens to mom and dad at the same time, this is how things look. And we wanted to get the impact and input not only from each other as a spouse, but we also wanted to hear, what the kids had to say. I mean, one of the decisions that, my wife had to go through was the decision of being the healthcare power of attorney for her dad. And, during COVID, unfortunately, we lost her dad, and she had to make the tough decision on what to do with being the power of attorney. Having two boys, we wanted to have that conversation with them, and we wanted them to communicate with us what they were comfortable with. We wanted them to understand what our wishes were. And I think having that communication up front allows us to prevent some of the shock that happens after the fact. Even communicating what your wishes are with your funeral arrangements, even taking it a step further and having those arrangements done ahead of time can be well emotionally for your family, and financially it can help them not make emotional decisions at the time of need, excess spending dependent upon what your wishes were for your funeral. And number five, I'd say don't forget about your digital assets and or your passwords that you have. I know that my passwords change all the time. My wife and I, we use a system on one of the password keepers where she's able to see what our passwords are on each of our accounts. It's a way to keep them updated. I know working with another financial advisor, he was helping his parents out, and when his dad passed away, they had a real difficult time being able to find the passwords to everything. Created, really kind of complexity as well. I've taken and I've put all of this together, and what we've created is the ultimate estate planning checklist. I'd love to share it with you. Or if you want to subscribe to our channel, if you look under estate planning, we've got a lot of more great tips on how to, prevent that legacy planning mistakes from happening in your family. But there's a couple of good pointers that help you tighten up your plan, because if you weren't here tomorrow, I want you to be able to confidently answer the question that your family would know what to do and know where everything is that they need.